Hey everybody, this is Ben from the Untitled Draft League, also known as UDL, and that's how I'll be referring to it. I'm also known as JPEG Friendly Fellows, that's my Discord tag, and I want to be going over our Season 3 main season, going over each of the teams, talking about their strengths, giving some suggestions of how I would tweak them, also talking about how each of the players did this season. This season was really fantastic, I think, way more close than Season 2, like no one was undefeated, and no one went winless, which was really nice to see. And it was super close playoff rate. The playoff race was pretty tight, which is always fun. Yeah. This is the first kind of time I'm doing a video like this, and sorry if my wired Apple AirBud audio quality isn't great, and if I have to whisper because it's midnight right now, and I don't want to wake up the family, so my voice might not be as soothing as Matthew's, unfortunately. But yeah, let's get into it. I think I'm going to go up from the bottom of the standing, starting with Doze Cannons, Handkerchiefs, right up here. So when you first see this, when I first start looking at this team, one thing that jumps out at me is the offense. The offense is phenomenal, especially in a Dynamax meta. UDL plays on Series 9 for those unaware, but I think most people are going to watch this are UDL coaches. So Blastoise, fantastic for Water Spout, also had fantastic Gmax move, like the chip effect, same as Vocalith, Wildfire, and Vine Lash. I forget what Blastoise's is called. I mean, Metagross, obviously phenomenal series, 9mon, and really just great coverage, great stabs, can run Weakness Policy, can run Life Orb, can run Assault Vest. It's just fantastic. Can be fast, can run in Trick Room. And then Alolan, I'm a big Alolan fan. I think it's phenomenal. I think Lightning Rod is super underrated on it, especially next to Blastoise and Articuno. Articuno I'll get into later. But great, fucking insane stabs. Pretty solid typing, and obviously limited by its item, but a phenomenal Trick Room Sweeper. I used it to get a semifinal finish in UDL Season 2. And then some of the off-offensive threats, you have Articuno, who, despite having the 4 times weakness and a lot of really bad weaknesses, also some phenomenal strengths, especially if you like throw a Scarf on it and have Hailstorm on Blastoise and then just start firing off Scarf Blizzards. It's fantastic. Hitmonlee, when unburdened by Thwackey with Grassy Seed, it's pretty solid. Gets Fake Out, gets solid coverage. Also some decent support moves. And then Electivire, also decent offensive electric type. Pretty good for its point value. And then on the support side is where I have some things I would tweak. Grimmsnarl is a fantastic Pokemon, and it has some great things. I think it's great next to Blastoise, being able to set up the screens, which Blastoise really appreciates. But I think Grimmsnarl is a little bit overkill on this team. I think the points would have better been saved for a more viable Trick Room setter, in my opinion. Togetic here is fantastic. Like, the only reason I wouldn't have 100% picked Morgrem is because if you're planning on picking Togetic, you don't really want that Eviolite competition, and Togetic's a fantastic Eviolite user. Redirection is really solid. But then, obviously, Thwackey, incredible. Combustion has, like, coaching, like Will-O-Wisp, Helping Hand, some okay support moves. And Speed Boost, if you want to, like, protect, Speed Boost up, get a Will-O-Wisp off on something that could be kind of fast, like a Landorus or something. And then I have a gripe against Claydol. I think it's not good, personally. Like, obviously, like, I'm not the coach. Like, Cannons probably has some solid uses for it, but I think your points would have been better spent on a more solid Trick Room setter to enable your 2 really solid, like, Trick Room Sweepers and Alolan and Metagross, like, super great. So just having a more consistent Trick Room option would have been nice. I think on this team would have done this team some good. Yeah, that's kind of most of my thoughts, I think. Just very solid team overall. And in terms of like Cannon's performance, for this being their first foray into VGC, they did phenomenal. Like 2-8 may not seem great, but we have some really good coaches, and the games we played were close. Like foul play man to buzz was insane into this like team comp, especially without Electivire. So like I just had a really personally had a fantastic matchup when I did watch their games. Even if it didn't result in the win, Cannons did play pretty close, and to that I definitely respect. Sure, let's move on to the next team. Houston Reggie Rocks. Jay's team. Where is it? J McG10. This squad is scary. This squad is freaking scary. Celesteela was our kill leader. If we look at our leaderboards, yeah, 25 kills overall, 14 deaths, plus 11 game played, game win. Really fantastic. Fantastic. Like, oh, that's not what I wanted to click. Roster, perfect. And then I played Jay late in the season because I know he made like some swaps on this end, picking up the Sun mode with like Venusaur. Was a later season pickup. Not sure. I'm assuming Ninetales came along with that, but I don't really know what this Slowpoke is doing here. I think that was a trade. Indeedee female, really, really solid. One of the best redirectors in the game. Stab expanding force, helping hand, trick room, so much great utility. Psychic terrain, obviously the main point. And goes up really solid with Celesteela for some sort of like lead sheet sub setup if you want to run that, or an offensive like automized setup if you really wanted. Goes incredible with Belly Drum Azumarill. My brain farted for a second. Indeed, fantastic on its own. And then you get to the Sun mode with Venusaur, Ninetales, and honestly, I even consider Rotom Heat a part of this Sun mode, which may seem like weird, but having the boosted fire types, not being scared of the ground types that Ninetales is scared of, not being scared of the flying types that Venusaur is scared of, really great, and just it covers the weaknesses so well. It may seem a bit redundant with already having an electric type and a fire type, but it slots into the team really solidly, and I think that's great. Obviously, Pikachu for lightning rod support in both Celesteela and Azumarill, fantastic. Scraggy, fake out, intimidate, coaching, helping hand, gets the usual good support moves. Don't really know what you would do with Baby Hippowd on here. I don't really know what you would do with that, but really, really solid team from Jay. I think this is one of my favorite teams, honestly. I'm probably going to say that about a bunch of teams, but I'm a huge fan of Weather. I think Weather's a fantastic mode, and there's so much great synergy here. If we look at the standings, for a team that went 2-9, I really think this, what's more reflective of Jay as a player is the game difference. Being 2-9 and having -10 and like being 10-20, that's a lot better than it looks. I'm pretty sure there's only 2 games that of the 9 games that Jay lost. I was looking at this earlier. I think only 2 games were 2-0. Like, my game was super close with Jay, I remember. Like, he's a really fantastic VGC player, and he knows, especially for being relatively new to the scene, I'm pretty sure this is one of his first forays into the scene, but he is incredible at establishing that offensive pressure. His team is really scary offensively, and once I think Jay starts learning how to like make a couple of better defensive plays, and because honestly, he would have beaten me like given like 1 or 2 less misplays on the defensive end in our game. Like, he was really close. So I think next season Jay's going to come back and dominate, and he's doing decent in RTT, in Redeem the Trash, the other draft league that our admin's run. I think he's doing pretty good in that right now. I don't participate in that, so I'm not really sure, but I think I saw that he was doing pretty solid in there. Yeah, okay, we'll move on. Next is the Utah Umbreons. This team coached by Connor, originally coached by Season 1 champion and Season 2 finalist Shaggy until they had to drop out. This team, at first I was a little confused by it because if you look at it, it's a lot of offensive threats. Obviously, you have Spectrier and like other things like Rodrigo, when given the right support, can be fantastic. I'm a big fan of Circuitry. I think Circuitry is fantastic and pretty underlooked. But then, and obviously Clefable. But what was interesting about this team is, at first, was it wasn't Clefable, it was a Clefairy. And having Porygon and Clefairy being your top two, like, cost-wise mons is really interesting because they're going to be fighting for Eviolite. I definitely agree with the swap that was made to Clefable, and I think that was done under Shaggy. But Shaggy was the old coach. I don't know if I mentioned his name. But I actually played Connor in their first week, and they beat me pretty solidly. My team had a decent weakness to ice types, and Connor found that weakness, able to use Avalok to exploit it really well. Like a curse Avalok set was really cool, and like I totally underprepped for Regidrago and P2. Like those mons like can do things outside of like their established like typical VGC like role. And same thing with Spectrier. Spectrier can run support, run offensive. Like Morgrem, I think, is a fantastic value pick. Even Turtonator, I think Turtonator's underrated. It's a pretty decent trick room on, and for a one-pointer, Grookey's pretty fantastic. Like you get grassy terrain, you get priority grass moves, you get fake out. Very solid. And yeah, Connor being a replacement coach, I didn't get to see too much of them play, but I think they can definitely make a very good run next season, especially not being a replacement coach. I was a replacement coach last season. It's tough, especially inheriting a negative record. And then the number 9, Melbourne Matangs. I think this is Nova's team, right? Yeah, Nova's team. Nova also a replacement coach. I forget the original coach who coached this team, but it's definitely interesting. Like originally it was Alecki instead of Reggie Alecki instead of the Tapu Fini. It's the only team that has 2 20-point mons, which I think is really interesting. Like trying to pick up some super high value like points. I definitely agree with the swap that Nova made to Tapu Fini. I think Reggie Alecki can be kind of one-dimensional sometimes, and Tapu Fini is really great. I used it last season. I loved it. Fantastic Series 9 Pokemon, has so much depth and so many options. Landorus Tape obviously is oppressive in some circumstances, and those two make a pretty solid core, covering each other's weaknesses decently. Shedinja, which if you can pull off a Shedinja strat, you can pull off a Shedinja strat. That's all I'm gonna say. It's either the worst mon in the game or the best mon in the game. It's Shedinja for a reason. Torcat, I think, fantastic value pick. Intimidate, fake out, having double intimidate. I think is really interesting. I think it could be really solid in certain like circumstances, especially drafts tend to be physically biased. I think that's a trend that happens a lot. If we look at some of the other teams, I can kind of point that out. So double intimidate is fantastic. Will-O-Wisp, fantastic. Taunt, fantastic. Parting shot. Like Torcat's pretty underrated, and having the speed advantage over Incineroar can be really nice. And just having a general decent speed here for low value support mon is really nice. Togekiss, really solid, can run the support redirection set, can run the crit offensive set, can run a bunch of different things. Pretty solid coverage and just great typing overall. It's like Togekiss is popular for a reason. It's pretty solid. Sableye, prankster mon that's immune to prankster taunt and immune to fake out. Really solid. Can set up a lot of good things. Sableye's fantastic. Prankster Will-O-Wisp, Prankster Quash, which is pretty unique. It's awesome. I think Sableye's really fantastic. And Gotharita, fake out Frisk, even competitive if you really wanted to run it, but I would always run Frisk or Shadow Tag if you want to do some Paris strats. Go 3 is pretty solid. Matang, I mean, not really doing much with Matang. You could pull off a set, I guess. Blaziken, fantastic, in draft especially. Getting Max Flares off is really nice. Actually, when I played the original coach. I didn't play Nova, but when I did play them, Blaziken was a super big threat. I think they took a game off me with it, actually. But, yeah, it was definitely a threat I had to be careful for. Drizzle, fun name. I mean, fast, good stab, like, hits kind of hard on the special side, especially for a 1-point mon, but kind of one-dimensional. Gets Ice Shard if you really wanted a weakness policy on Landorus or Togekiss. That's interesting. And Uxie is phenomenally bulky mon, gets some decent support moves, gets Foul Play, gets U-Turn. I think it's an Imprisoned Trick Room, which I think is always, like, such a cool option. Again, like, that's kind of my team ideas, like, some solid things. It's definitely missing, like, some offensive pressure, like, when you're third best, when, like, you have 2 of your top 3 mons, like, cost-wise are fairy types, and, like, then your next best offensively is Blaziken. It can get kind of rough, but definitely, like, really solid on the support end. Could use some more offensive variety, but pretty solid team overall. I didn't really get to see much of Nova as a coach, but, like, I think they brought this team from a pretty not great record to what they have now, and I think that's pretty impressive. Let's move on to Applejack's AI. Not piloted by Applejacks, actually, but piloted by Iron Knuckle, and this was originally piloted by our resident Shedinja fan, Azur, I don't really know how you pronounce the name, but Azur's a phenomenal jokester who's great fun and loves their Shedinja strats. But I think they built a pretty solid UDL team. Hatterene Lapras, a fantastic Trick Room core. I love this Trick Room core. It's so scary once it gets going. Riolu, pretty good Prankstermon, like, gets all the typical Prankstermon stuffs. Carbink is actually pretty bulky, surprisingly, with Eviolite and decent Trick Room setter if you didn't want to rely on the hat. Regigigas, it's Gigas. It's so polarizing. It's either great or it's kind of mediocre. It really just depends on how well they play. And I think Iron Knuckle actually beat the number 1 seed in the regular season, so definitely it has potential. And, like, Azur, who, like, self-admittedly is very not experienced in VGC, like, took a game off me and honestly almost won back when the team was running Corviknight. But yeah, really solid. Like, gave me a run for my money. Pincursion Raichu, obviously such a fantastic duo. Raichu hitting things for really big damage on the electric side, and obviously boosted by the Pincursion. And Pincursion is really valuable in being the slowest terrain setter, so throwing an obstacle and terrain-based strategies could be really interesting. Dhelmise, I think, is really solid. Essentially, it's like 3 stab types. Pretty great in Trick Room, which this team is very Trick Room oriented, which I think is really cool. I ran a pretty Trick Room oriented team last year, and I think the strat's cool. Weezing to enable the Gigas also can do its own thing, can run Levitate, which is pretty solid, makes it not weak to a whole lot, like Will-O-Wisp, Taunt. Poison coverage is surprisingly, like, useful, especially when there's so many dominant fairy types. Connie, good prankster moves, another solid prankster mon to have. And Gabite could probably do some work. I would need to see it. I think it was decent in Redeem the Trash, but I don't know about its UDL performance. Again, I think Iron Knuckle is our last replacement coach, but really solid. They did make the cut for playoffs, and I think once playoffs are over, I'll definitely do a playoffs video. So, yeah, definitely really solid. Really solid from Iron Knuckle. And then next is me, JPEG, the Cali Camera Ups. moving into our first positive win rate team, not that, like, that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think these teams all played super close and were all really fantastic. Like, I lost to the Utah Embryons, and I played close games with some of those teams. Like, it's definitely, the league is so close. I just, like, want to reiterate that. It's really close in skill. My team all the way in this bottom right corner. Obviously, my team, I'm going to have a lot to say about it. I think it's pretty solid. Rillaboom Mandibuzz was, I really wanted to try out this core. Like, that was my favorite. I think Mandibuzz is pretty fantastic, especially with Grassy Seed. It's so bulky, it doesn't die to anything that isn't, like, a weakness policy super effective move. It doesn't die in one hit. Snarl, I think, is really underrated in VGC. Foul Play is fantastic. Being able to, like, set Tailwind, like, a turn later than, like, a foe's Tailwind because you're slower, I think is really solid. Like, being able to win out the drawn-out speed control war. Being immune to Prankster Taunt because of the dark typing is nice. I think Mandibuzz is really underrated. And obviously Rillaboom, Fake Out, Grassy Glide, it's a G-Max. I actually haven't been running offensive Rillaboom at all. Rillaboom has been very much a support-oriented mon on my end of the field. I ran a Swords Dance set 1 week, and it did not do well. Then I love sand. It's my favorite weather, so my sand core of Hippowdon Dracozolt. Hippowdon has come to play this season. It's my kill leader. It's, like, a fantastic answer to Trick Room. It's fantastic support. Assault Vest on it is insane. It's so bulky and deals out pretty good damage. It has pretty solid coverage. And Dracozolt has been pretty hit or miss. When it's hit, but when it's missed, it's really not that great. Having Electric Physical Stab is fantastic. Sand Rush, obviously, but also getting access to Hustle. I don't really think I ran a lot of Hustle. I hate running non-accurate moves. And speaking of non-accurate moves, Tentacruel missed. I've ran a decent amount of Muddy Water Tentacruel, and hasn't been fantastic in terms of my luck hitting the move, but overall, I think Tentacruel is a really fantastic pickup, especially for the 8 points I got it for. It was a pickup midway through the season. My water type was Jellicent. It was part of my Trick Room core of Jellicent, Conkeldurr, and Gothitelle, and obviously, like, Hippowdon was a part of that, but it wasn't doing too well. It didn't have fantastic synergies with the team, and I was missing some key things, so I wanted to drop it, rebuild, and Tentacruel was the pickup. I wanted a poison type. I wanted some more speed outside of Tailwind and Sand. I wanted some more just, like, base speed, so I got base 100. Really solid, like, solid coverage, great stabs. Like, hits a lot of the strong threats that are present, super effective. I think it's a fantastic mon. I really love it. I ran, like, some really interesting sets on it, I think. And then another, like, super valuable 8-point mon, Stoutland. The fact that I got this thing for 8 points is a fucking crime. Sorry for my language, Matthew, because I know you're going to point that out. Yeah, Stoutland's fantastic. Access to 3 incredible abilities, insane coverage. Like, just what a fantastic, like, Pokemon that rounds up my team. I don't really know if I've run Scrappy, but I've definitely ran a fair amount of both Sand Rush and Intimidate. It's base 80 speed is really solid, especially for a Sand Rush mon is really nice. It's so good with, like, a Life Orb or a Choice Band. Like, in Sand, it's just gonna outspeed and definitely pick up some kills. Like, it's really solid. Volcarona, another one of my late season pickups. Rage Powder's fantastic. Actually, Volcarona was a huge part of my strategy in beating Jay, just because of the kind of tedious, like, the dangerous, like, nature of running Sun with 2 Fire-type weak offensive mons. So Volcarona is really solid in that matchup, but also fantastic redirection. Flame Body Burns, really solid. Struggle Bug, essentially being very similar to Snarl. Mystical Fire, also being able to run offensive sets. Really fantastic. Then Drake Cobalion, the last 2 of my actually not the last two of my mid-season pickups, but some more of my mid-season pickups. Beat Up Justified is insanely powerful, like, obviously for a reason. Being immune to fake out with your beat upper is really nice. And also having other options like Will-O-Wisp and Thunderwave. What else? Like, being able to dodge stuff with Phantom Force, Breaking Swipe, Surf if I wanted to run some funny Weakness Policy for Corona set. Yeah, really just fantastic moves. Cobalion, obviously, really solid coverage. The fact that this thing doesn't get ground coverage upsets me. It needs ground coverage. But other than that, pretty solid coverage, great stabs. Justified, fantastic ability, and it's really solid. Like, it has some nice physical bulk. It lives some hits. Mr. Rhyme was like, well, if you look at my first 4 Mons, you'll notice all 4 of them were weak to ice, so having an ice starter is kind of helpful. Also, like, like, being able to get rid of screens is really nice. There's a couple of teams that could make really good use of screens, and being able to kind of disable that is really nice. Icy Wind, pretty good, Helping Hand, the usual, like, a couple of support moves. Yeah, I like it. I think it's a solid Mon. Yeah, about the 6 points worth I spent on it. Sandshrew, like, it's my 1 point Mon, just to give me a little more flexibility up here. Maybe I run Sand Rush, some crazy strat, but maybe it's insane and I'm underestimating it. But yeah, I think I'm gonna split this into 2 parts, getting kind of long. I think I'm gonna end it there. I think I might do a second part tomorrow when I don't have to whisper. But yeah, this is the first half of the teams. I think I'll do top 6 tomorrow. Thanks for listening. If you do end up listening, I really appreciate it. Yeah, this has been me. I hopefully see you soon.